Once you've got an activity with a fragment and you're clicking on the fragment, you might want to do more than just make text with the fragment data. So one of the common things you might do when you're clicking on a list is you might want to start some other activity that includes data passed from your fragment. So that's what I'm going to do. So we currently have a main activity, which includes a fragment that when you click on that fragment, it passes the position of the item you clicked, so you can know which one you clicked. To launch another activity, obviously I would have to add another activity to my project. So I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to do a new activity, and it's just going to be an empty activity. So instead of calling it main activity 2, I'll just call it next. So my next activity, and I'm going to add it to my application. So if I finish, my next activity is now in my app. So I didn't click things correctly, and so it's doing the support version 7. So I'm actually just going to get app compatible activity. I'm going to make it the same kind of activity as my main activity. So I'm going to go just activity and activity. There. Android.app. There. So it's just a basic activity with an on create, and it's referencing the activity_next layout file. So now I have a second activity that I can launch from my first activity. So I go back to my main activity, and instead of my toast message, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create an intent, and I'm going to launch my activity from my intent. So I'm going to do INTENT. I'm just going to call it I1 for intent 1. Oops, I haven't included the intent in my activity. So if I go here and I go Alt-Enter, it'll add my intent up here to my import statements. Intent I1 equals new intent. And I have to tell it what the intent is associated with. So the intent originates from my main activity dot this. So this copy of my main activity. And it's going to launch my next activity dot class. So essentially the compiled version of my next activity. Now, if I wanted to put some data into this intent, I would say, okay, I1, which is the name of my intent, and I'm going to put extra, which is the method for putting extra data into things, bundles or intents. And what I'm going to put this position. So you have to, it's a name value pair. So I'm going to give it a name, POS for position, and I'm going to pass in the position variable. So now I've added some data to my intent. And so now I can start the activity, and I'm going to pass it the intent. And so now if I run it, oops, so I've run it, my app appears, and when I click on stuff 1, instead of getting a toast message, it should launch the intent and actually display my next activity. So now that I know that my fragment or my main activity can use an intent to launch another activity, I want to be able to get the data I put into my intent out. And in order to do that, I would go to next activity, And I would do exactly what I did in the blank fragment to get data out of a bundle. Oops. Back into my blank fragment. I'm going to copy this. Go to next activity. So I am going to go if get arguments not equal to null. Then I'm going to get arguments, got get int. And I'm going to get the int position. So the get arguments method and this would be int, so I would create an int variable outside of this. Actually, we don't use get arguments. We actually have to get the data out of the intent. So we use this, we use get intent dot get extras, so we're getting the extra data. So if get intent dot get extras is not equal to null, then we're going to get the intent, got extras, and we're going to get an int out of the extra data, and we're going to assign it to the variable items. So I'm getting items is red now because I haven't declared items, so I'm going to create a variable int items. And now items is gray because I'm not using it, so the easiest way for me to use it is to set the title of my app. So I'm going to set the title to stuff equals plus position, no, actually plus the items variable. Items is still red and underlined because I may not have initialized items, so I'm going to go back and initial the items to be -1. So if you didn't pass any data, it's going to say stuff -1. Otherwise, it'll say stuff 0, 1, or 2, depending on which one you click. So this should allow me to pass data through the intent into the second activity. So let me click, and we're going to run our app. So now my app has loaded. I see my stuff 1, stuff 2, stuff 3. So hopefully if I click on this, it's going to load my second activity and say stuff 1. So now I'm passing data from my first activity into my second activity using intents.